Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Upside Swings NBA Draft podcast, the podcast, The High Ceiling. I'm your host, Bryce Hendricks, joined as always by the great Cooper Klein, the wonderful Stone Hansen, and we're coming to you hopefully in a fairly short time frame since the last pod. We're recording it in a very short time frame at the very least, but another redraft, the 2016 NBA Draft, which was an interesting one to revisit. This is another draft that Coop and I had done some preliminary work on in terms of watching the bigs from this draft. And we found that to be kind of interesting. And so I came in here with a little bit of some forethought in terms of, what to expect. But as I was going through and doing this exercise, I had a really interesting time. And I do think there are some philosophical differences here that might show themselves. I think there's a lot of guys in different tiers who are on similar levels in terms of what they've quote unquote accomplished in their NBA careers that we will have some fun debates on. But before we get too into it, Coop Stone, my friends, how you guys doing?
Splendid. Because I'm here talking basketball instead of doing actual work. So, I'm doing good. I'm more prepared today than I was yesterday when we recorded the first episode of this. So, I'm feeling good about my chances of winning this. I guess I don't know if we said it on the last one either, but maybe we should put up a poll of who people think had the best draft, and let us know and make sure you vote for me. So maybe we'll do that.
Yeah, nice job springing this on us right now. Now that it's competitive, I'm thinking a lot more about it. I'm doing well. Long time no see, fellas, but always happy to hop right in. And we get to talk about, I think this is one of the funniest drafts of all time. 2013 is up there, but just this one, the comedic value of some of these picks is off the charts. The storylines are all there. It's just super interesting from every single dimension, including a basketball dimension that we'll get into. But hard to overstate how weird of a draft this is.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think there's no better place to start than with the first overall pick. And Coop, I'm going to throw this to you. I do think there is some debate here between two guys, so I'm really interested to see where you go with this. The floor is yours.
I'm going to go with the first pick. I'm going to go, I think, in kind of a weird direction. I'm going to go with Pascal Siakam. I think here at one. I think Jaylen Brown, who, spoiler, I think is the second guy here, is just not the same level of versatile and does not have the same motor, does not have the same development of tertiary skills. Jaylen Brown, obviously more of the alpha scorer, driver, shooter, all these things. That's so much easier to find. And I think even in this class, you're going to find guys who are arguably pretty close to the same level of scorer, who are far more scalable with different rosters, and you'll get different looks at that same thing. There's maybe 5 guys in the world and 10 in world history who can do what Pascal Siakam do on a night in, night out basis. He's incredibly underrated and one of the more fun prospects to go back and watch his tape because the funk is always there. Siakam is all funk and just effort, and putting it all together just opened up superstar possibilities that I don't know if anybody saw, even, the Raptors. So I'm a big fan of him. I'm going to go with him at 1. I think he's the perfect mixture of just super talented and super versatile and super hardworking. All the things I want in my, go-to or secondary guy.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I would have taken Siakam 1 and just for shits and giggles, because I think it's kind of fun to talk about him as a pair. I will take Jaylen Brown 2. That is the pick. That is the order I would have gone as well. I think Siakam has had such an interesting career. Obviously, wins an MIP. He comes 10th in MVP voting during the 1920 bubble season. He's made 2 All-NBA teams, so less All-NBA teams than the top guys we were talking about yesterday. But I would argue that Pascal has probably had a better career than Karl Anthony Towns. Now he's a little bit older. This will be his age 32 season this year. or excuse me, this will be his age 31 season this year. So that is, somewhat interesting, right? That there's a guy that drafted 27th. It's a pretty easy guess that this will be the largest jump that anyone will make to the number one overall pick. I'm pretty sure all the drafts we're going to do, everyone that would have been number one was at least a lottery pick. The only other guys you could think that, in past drafts like that are somewhat recent, I mean, like a Jimmy Butler went 30th, I believe. But for the most part, this is a rare thing, right? That someone who goes in the late first round ends up as the best, or at least an argument for the best player in the draft. I think, Siakam has won a championship, has been and was the second best player on that team. I love Kyle Lowry. Pascal Siakam was the second best player on that team. What I love about Pascal is that it seems like there's been just constant reinvention. Early in his career, he was like this lockdown defender. There was a time where he was probably the most, terrifying isolation defender in the whole NBA. Very few people have ever guarded LeBron like young Pascal Siakam guarded LeBron. Then he obviously turned himself into a higher volume scorer. That was around his third season. He started to get some buckets a little bit more. And then especially his fourth season, which was right after Kawhi left, he really blew up, and he's been a consistent 20 points per game scorer since. He's made himself a lot of money, still contributes defensively. He's turned himself into like a knockdown shooter. Like, he was a great shooter this last year for Indiana. I would say he's a huge reason they made the finals. He's a real part of why they, had a chance before the Halliburton injury. So love Pascal. I think that's the right pick there. As for Jaylen Brown has the best top end accolade of any of these players, right? Because he's won a Finals MVP. He's younger. This will be his age 29 season, so he's a full 2 years younger than Pascal. He's only made one All NBA team, but he's made more All Star games. Really, another guy with a really interesting career path where, again, I think what he was kind of drafted on and what a lot of his early career was built on was being this like lockdown defender. And now you don't really think of him as a great defender. He's arguably at times the fourth or fifth best defender on those Celtics teams, but he can still guard on the ball okay and contribute on that end. And he's a really dynamic scorer, especially with his jump shot. He's a good athlete, but for the most part, he gets his buckets, off the dribble with jumpers. He can make shots from the outside, but really sort of a mid-range assassin. Part of the reason I prefer Pascal over him is I just think Pascal's a more efficient player. I think he's a little bit easier to fit on more teams because he has slightly higher feel and is a better passer. And he contributed to winning a little bit earlier. And so we'll see too, like if Pascal falls off a cliff and then Jaylen Brown has 3 more years because he's a couple years younger, this could shift, right? Like, who knows? Maybe with no Tatum, a Peyton Pritchard, Jaylen Brown led team is shockingly good, and then they, that's another feather in the cap, and Jaylen Brown's an All NBA guy, whatever. There's possibilities, but this is the order I would have gone. Stone, before you take your pick at 3, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Pascal Jaylen Brown dichotomy.
Yeah, it's probably the route I would have gone, but I think it would be team dependent with how the rest of my roster is constructed a bit. But I would lean Siakam for the fact that he's been so pliable, I think is the word I would use to describe him throughout his entire career, where he, to me, some of the most valuable players are the ones that do anything on any given night. If you need to be that lockdown defender on a certain night, I think Siakam still has that in him to be that. It might not be night in or night out, but he can provide that if that is what he's called to do on a specific game. He can be a facilitator at times. He can be the leading scorer certain nights. Like whatever role Siakam is asked to fill, I feel like he's capable of doing so. And I think that is something that to me is really made him such a valuable player in the league and somebody that I think I would lean a little bit towards building around, as opposed to Brown, who I think is capable of doing, a lot of things on the court, but not to the level of Siakam. But I do think that both these guys are easily the top 2 picks in this class, I would say. So I would agree, regardless of order, with these picks. Most people will not agree with my 3rd pick here, and that is okay. Probably, I don't know if neither of you mind either, but I am going to go with someone who's won double the championships that either of you guys have picked in Alex Caruso, because I like winning basketball.
This is insane. Okay, this is I like Caruso. This is he
Career
would not
bench
even
player,
been,
by the way.
he would
I love
not even
Caruso,
have been close
You're wrong.
to the
Wrong.
guy here. I love Caruso. I think there's so much like about his game. He's easily a top 10 player in this class. 3 ahead of some of the guys. There's certain guys I would have made the argument for him to agree with you. There are 3 guys that I think there is absolutely no argument for him ahead of. So I want to hear you make it, but I just I'm a little bit taken aback.
Yeah, I figured, and I'm sure most people will be too. But I think that out of the names left, if I want someone to play 20 plus minutes a game, I think he has had multiple. When he was at the Lakers, he was playing heavy minutes for a large portion of the season. The Thunder, obviously, there's so much talent, especially amongst the guards, that it's difficult to get to that level. But Caruso helps you win basketball. I think he's really valuable in trying to win basketball games. There's a reason he's a 2-time championship, and it's not because he played, only like 6 minutes or something in playoff and finals settings. Like he was a significant portion of both championship runs, and I think that I have an easier time taking someone like Alex Caruso, who I know is going to win me basketball games, versus guys that have more illustrious careers, more accolades, that are in bigger roles, that I'm a lot less confident in winning me basketball games, even though they're in a larger role. I think that, to me, is not as valuable as someone who might be in a lesser role, but is contributing to winning at a higher level. And I think that, for me, is the tipping point as to why I prefer Alex Caruso to a lot of the other names that I'm sure you guys are about to pick right after me.
Why didn't you just pick Jakob Poeltl then?
You haven't got to my next pick yet.
Here's my concern with Caruso. I do think we comfortably pave over the parts of these types of players' careers that we don't love to acknowledge. People forget that he spent 3 years on the Bulls winning basically fucking nothing. If he doesn't get traded for Josh Giddey in what ended up being a home run trade for the Thunder, there's no way you consider picking him here. If he was just on the Bulls for another year, I don't think you consider picking him. He's a great player, but there's still all these concerns. He happens to go to a team where other players are able to drive the winning, and I still think there's at least 2 players left who drive winning in that way, and Caruso doesn't. Caruso is a great additive piece if you have the guys that can drive your winning, and I agree with like he's really, really good, and I don't want that to get lost here. Like, I love Caruso, and I think that he is absolutely the type of guy you take with a top 10 pick, right? You're looking for these kinds of role players where they're a huge add on one end or the other. I think he's a great example of why you draft guys for their strengths and not their weaknesses, because he's overcome some of those weaknesses and been able to accentuate those strengths. But I just don't think he could drive win. Like you can't just there are 2 guys left who you could pluck them out, and they are at least like a top 15, top 20 type on one end or the other, just kind of on their own, right? Like, that's not like Caruso, as good as he is defensively, he's not just, he's definitely going to make us a top 20 offense or defense, excuse me. And he's definitely not going to make you a top 20 offense. He has to be in a really specific role where he's, off ball two guard who can, you can let him loose to guard as much at the nail. He's not really even like a lockdown guy, right? Like he's a good on ball defender, but he's not like he's at his best being more of a rover, right? Helping on bigger guys and stuff like that. So this is just not the move for me. As good as he is, like Coop said, he did only start 3 games for the Thunder. He is not even close to meeting what is called starter criteria for his career. I just struggle with that one. But Stone, you're up again. If you want to push back a little bit, you can, and then go ahead and take your guy here at 4.
I will say that I once again, because I don't have a big board, I made the fatal flaw of not considering 3 and 4. My 4th pick, a lot of people are probably going to disagree with as well, so I don't know if it makes that big a difference. But I would have taken Caruso 4th if I was paying hard attention to the order that I'm picking players. But I knew I was on a turn. My one question to summarize my pushback would be, is there anybody still available that you believe in their current role that would produce the level of winning that Caruso does in his current role?
Yes. There's at least 2 guys. At least 2 guys.
Especially if you're not talking about like this season. If you're talking about in the past, within the last however many years it's been since then, I think there's multiple guys.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to take another probably controversial pick. I'm going to go Ivica Zubac here, who I think brings more winning than the bigger names that are probably going to go right after, who I would have taken over Caruso. I wasn't paying attention. But this is a player that I think should have been like in the first team all defensive team this year for the NBA. He is a stalwart defensively, the best post-up defender, I would say, in the NBA currently, and a high-level rim deterrent, I should say, who offensively has really stepped his game up in terms of the rim running over the course of his career. He's still able to put the ball on the floor and do some post-up moves effectively, and is super efficient as an offensive player. Obviously, he plays with Harden and great offensive players alongside him that make that a little bit easier, especially when he's like the 4th option. But there's, I think, a lot of steady trajectory throughout his career on both ends of the court that have gotten him to this point of, to me, being an easy top 5 player from this class. So I'm going to go with him here at 4.
Yeah, Zubac is definitely someone that I think I definitely would have taken well above Caruso. But I do think this is kind of around the range for him. I have one guy in a tier above him who I'll take next. But other than that, like the accolades aren't there, right? Made all defensive second team last year, which I think I agree with Stone, probably a little low. It's important to note that he got a really late start to his career. Like he, not in the same way, Caruso had a delayed year and then was on a 2-way for a year. It was a delayed start that way. His was more just, he barely played as a rookie. He barely played during his sophomore year. Finally, during his 3rd year, the Lakers move on from him and he goes to the Clippers and he starts playing more. And then he's been a pretty consistent starter, high level player ever since. Not someone who is like some great offensive player. I think he's probably a middle of the road starting big offensively. He can pass, which is nice. He's a good post up player, not a great one. Okay role finisher, not like a crazy athlete. But yeah, I mean defensively he's great. Right now he's probably a walking top 12 defense, basically all on his own. The rest of the defensive talent on that Clippers team was not great, and they were a good defense. So I think this is around the range. I definitely prefer him to a couple of the guys who have made all-star teams in this class, who, I'm sure people are already questioning their fall. But there is one guy that I still think should have been comfortably ahead of him. Coop, do you have any takes on Zubac before I pick?
Yeah, how many games has Zubac started? I'm trying to look that up right now. Because I feel like he's been like an all-time starter, basically.
He basically so throughout his career he's started 451 out of 584 games. So like quick dirty math, like almost like 80% of his games he started, and especially the last few years. And he's played a lot too. Like something that we probably don't talk about enough is like your availability. Since coming to the Clippers, I'm just going to count his full season with the Clippers. 72 games, 76 games, 76 games, 68 games, 80 games. He just like is never hurt. He's always healthy. He's always contributing. Very efficient offensive player, has shot above 62.5% basically every year of his career with the Clippers. Great player. But anyway, was there something else?
Yeah, and Stone's team traded him for like 10 games of Mike Muscala.
Okay, pick Bryce.
I honestly thought Coop had something else to say there, so I was trying to take a quick break. Okay. So I'll take Jamal Murray. And this should have been the guy at 3, Stone. I'm going to try not to get on your back about it. I know you're going to have some pushback here, but Jamal Murray, probably the best player to never make an All-Star game at this point, I would say. One of the best playoff risers, you should say, in recent memory. The argument Stone is going to make is that Jokic makes him so much better. He, in fact, in his words, he would be a 6th man on most other teams. My pushback on that is this has been a consistently efficient off the dribble scorer, consistently shooting, about 40 plus around 40%, right? Down to like 39 on a high volume of 3-point attempts. A lot of those are off the dribble. As good as Jokic is, Jokic could not create and make these, tough off the dribble shots. He is a great secondary offensive player. Now, his defense has been a concern, though I think it's survivable. Again, like it's not like Jokic is some stalwart defensive player, and Murray has contributed to a championship defensive team too. He's not like guarding the point of attack super well, but he can guard wings because he's a little bit bigger while playing the point role. He's not a great passer, but he's an okay one. I mean, the last few years he's averaged over 6 assists without turning the ball over a crazy amount, right? Like he has problems. There's a reason he's not an all-star. He's not a comfortable top 5 point guard in the NBA, but as one of the few remaining like almost throwback shooting guards in the league, like he's really good. He just makes shots at a really high level. He's lost some of his athleticism as a finisher, but he was like a great downhill driver and finisher at times too. Like he's just a really good scorer, and I do think we sometimes overrate that. Now availability is going to be a question with him. He doesn't play near as much as someone like a Zubac or anything, but there's just not a ton of guys in this draft or really in any draft who can say that they were the second best player, comfortably the second best player on a championship team, I would say. High level shot makers, high level secondary scorers who, really make the job of the primary easier. And again, we sometimes think, we've been spoiled with the likes of LeBron with our stars being like heliocentric. And so, and Luka to an extent too, right? Even Giannis, but sometimes we forget that it's good to have guys like Jamal who can, be a scoring point guard who can also just kind of set up your star player. Like he's a good high-low passer to get Jokic the ball. He can throw that little pocket pass, or he has good reads on Jokic's pops or whatever. Like he is a good secondary guy. I think Stone is right that he would not look particularly good if he was the main guy, but I think the argument is similar to Caruso, where it's like, well, if you don't need the main guy, this guy can make the offensive job easier for your main guy. So, Stone, do you want to give your pushback here before Coop has to choose between some of those frustrating all-stars?
Yeah, I am much lower on Jamal Murray than most people. I still think he's much closer to the back end, but like around a top 10 pick in this class. Definitely think that the level of his success has been extremely, I don't want to say solely dependent because obviously he's his own player, but he would not have the level of success that he has if he was not playing with Jokic. And I guess you can say that for a lot of players with the star players that they've played with. But I feel like with Murray in particular, it rings truer than a lot of number twos within the league. I think that Murray is a fine starting level player. I was being a bit hyperbolic with the 6-man stuff, but not someone to me that has done anything that deserves to be an all-star level player. And I think because all-star is regular season, by the way, not playoffs, but I don't think that he would be the pick that I'd have here or within the next probably 4 picks. But I understand that I'm in the minority on that, and he is, in his own right, Jokic or not, still a really good shooter. So there's value that Murray provides in an obvious NBA player and probably a starting level player, but to me, just rated too highly across the league from my perspective.
I have to say, like, this is like you could say that exact same thing about every single other guy we've talked about here because none of them are actually that good. like none except for maybe Siakam, who's like completely fit dependent. You know, if any of these guys got to play with Jokic, they'd be a lot better. You know, if anybody,
I think it's because Jokic is that good, but I think the difference here for me is you put any of the players that we talked about next to Jokic and they look better. But if you put Murray in any of the circumstances that those players have been in, I think he looks significantly worse.
I see. I think that's where I disagree because Murray's shooting is just so good. And I think he's at like a higher level of the tertiary and secondary stuff than Jaylen Brown, right? Like if you put Jamal Murray on the Celtics, I think he gets way more space. He gets to, just kill people in isolation. Like, I think that there's some give and take there that, yes, Jokic and Murray are so perfect together, but that is also because you have to guard Jamal Murray as a slasher and as an elite shooter. And that makes Jokic that much more dangerous, which then enhances the 2-man game. And I think that as much as it's just like, sure, in a vacuum and on a shitty team, he's not as good. It's like you picked Caruso at 3. And if you put Jamal Murray on the Bulls, he's still going to put up good numbers and, drag them kicking and screaming to more of a degree than a guy like Caruso would. And I get that, like, your argument is, the top end stuff, the high end, like if you're really trying to win a championship, then Caruso's stuff is more valuable. But I think that Murray is a lot more translatable than you would usually admit, especially for these kinds of like seemingly one-dimensional scorers. I think he's so good at shooting and scoring in general and at understanding like where his teammates are and where the ball needs to go. I think he's good enough at that stuff to where he is still super valuable on any team. Jokic just puts him over the top. So like I would take Murray here. I probably would have taken Murray at like 4. I'd take him over a lot of the other guys. But do you have anything to say, Stone, or are you okay if I hop on?
No, yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Okay.
Pick.
Yeah, this is where it gets really hard. These picks are nasty. There's like 4 guys I could really see myself
what it's
going
worth.
with here.
For what it's worth, I will say that I would have taken 4 of our top 5. Like that's 4 of the 5 guys that I would have at the top. I'm interested to see if Coop takes the other one because I do have like a tier break after that top 5 before we get to the guys that I really struggle with, who are obviously good NBA players, but who I really struggle with.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of have to, if you're looking at guy who maximizes the chance to win an NBA championship at any point during their career, I think this guy maximizes for like a 3-year period, could have won Defensive Player of the Year, was a good offensive player. He died and fell off a cliff, but I'm going to take Ben Simmons here at 6.
Wow.
I feel that's a little hot. I know he's in like the toilet bowl of public opinion, but this is a guy who was seen as the next LeBron for 3 years. He obviously had his flaws, but I think that he was really poorly coached on offense, and he was not properly utilized defensively because he was playing next to Embiid and other guys who like needed to be hidden at all times and not put into a system that was seriously built to win basketball games. I think if you're a serious franchise and you can get Ben Simmons and take that level of defense for 3 years and maximize that and the other players around him, like if you put him and Jamal Murray together, you could probably get pretty close to winning a championship off of just those two, in my opinion, for a 3-year period. I really like what Ben Simmons brought. I think he, could have been, if he was on Miami, he could have done some of what Bam Adebayo does, right? But he was forced to be a point forward because he was poorly coached and put into this team with 15 non-shooters and asked to be, the only good perimeter defender. So it sucks that he's kind of, he's probably just done with basketball, it seems like. But let's not forget how good he was for that period of time.
Yeah, and I mean, the truth is, too, like, I think it's important to not forget that things could have turned out very differently for him if his back didn't explode. I mean, there will be a time to do a full reevaluation on the quote-unquote legacy of Ben Simmons, right, and the ups and downs of it. But let's not forget that his last year, so he made an All-NBA team in his penultimate year in Philly, which was the 3rd year of his rookie contract. And then his second year, or his 4th year in Philly, he was 2nd Defensive Player of the Year and came 12th in MVP voting. I mean, those last, even though he didn't play as many games as you would hope for, those last 3 years, those 3 All-Star seasons were excellent. He was an excellent basketball player. Those Philly teams were, I believe, even 2018, were amongst the best in the East. His back exploded, and it seemed like he didn't care. He never got back to that. But that is a guy that, had he avoided the back injury, or had he gone to a better team, or whatever, however you want to slice it, there was a world that was that still could have been the highest ceiling guy in this draft. If you put me back in those shoes, back in this time, even with some idea of forethought, Ben Simmons is still the number 1 pick, because I still think there's a world that if things clicked right, he was comfortably the best player in this class. He's a top 10 player of this quote unquote of this era, right? Like it didn't work out, but there were some great years, and I think it's a good pick. This is not where I would have gone, but I respect you for going there, Coop. Anyways, take us away with your next pick.
Wait, Stone, you want to hop in?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if we're talking just straight like best seasons, like peaks, I would have Simmons probably 2 or 3 in this class. And had things worked out, like the trajectory that he was on in those Philly teams, even though they weren't winning because of how they were built, I think there's a very strong likelihood that he would have been the best player in this class. And we'd be talking about him as like, a top 30 player all time. Like, I think that outcome existed for him. Those trajectories existed for him when they didn't for most other guys. And I think that he remains one of the best combinations of, like when I had scouted him, I thought he was in that Cade level tier, maybe even higher of prospects, because he remains, I think, for me, the best combination of as a passer and perimeter defender that I think I've seen, that intersection of talent. And I don't know, I've always, I guess, had just sort of a soft spot for prospect Ben Simmons that has carried over to his NBA career. But I wish things had turned out differently, because he was a ton of fun to watch, and I think a really valuable player at his best.
I'm going to go in a completely different direction with my next pick here. I'm going to go with Fred VanVleet. I think this is a guy who
That's
had
the
an
other
all-star
guy for me.
peak. Yeah.
That's the other top 5 guy for me.
Yeah, he's good, and he had an all-star peak. He was the best. He was the bench point guard, and basically he became the starter eventually for them. I think during the finals because he went nuclear.
Yeah.
And Fred
Just
is
right
like,
after he had his baby. Like as soon as he had his
yeah,
baby, boom.
yeah, he was. I mean, that guy was ridiculous, and he's still. I mean, he's not super efficient at the moment, but he's still a great shooter. He's always been just a solid decision maker. He's kind of, I think, the best you can possibly be of this backup point guard archetype, where it's like just does not turn the ball over, makes fine decisions, but you know that you're not going to make a ton of mistakes and allow the other team to get back and run because he's just such a good ball handler. He makes smart decisions most of the time. He was overtasked, I think, the last 2 years with the Rockets as an offensive player, but I'm really excited to see him get back to not being the guy in the clutch, not being the guy, that he's a great kind of like what we talked about with Jamal Murray, where it's like the shooting is such a real threat. The ball handling is so good. I think the defense as a young guy is kind of forgotten. He's still a good defender, but he was like locked down at the point of attack, about as good as you can be for a guy of his size. And I just love what he brings at every aspect of the game. I think this is a guy who completely maximized what he could be in the league because he understood what he needed to be and he worked hard and he got there. And he's still there. He's still really good. He's still a slept on, really good, I'd say top 18 point guard in the league right now. He's just solid and always has been.
Yep, completely agree. I would say Fred VanVleet is the last of these guys that we're going to talk about who is simultaneously good enough to be drafted this high while also like contributing to winning. We're going to go on a run here, or at least assuming my guess is that even Stone will have to take some of these players, but we're going to go on a run here of guys who you kind of have to take here, but who don't help you win. And Fred VanVleet does. Like, I don't think Fred VanVleet's story is over. Like, there is a real chance that the Rockets are a championship level team next year or in the next couple years, and that he's going to be a big part of that. He is, again, he's not, he does not have a very flashy game, but he is a very fun basketball player, and he contributes to winning because he doesn't. His only hole is that he's not a very good downhill driver, and he really never has been. Right, he's never been an efficient 2-point shooter, but from an undrafted guy to an all-star, right, to someone who has been an important piece of a championship team, who I still think could be an important piece of another one. Like, yeah, just really good, really fun player. And I would have had him. I had him at 5 on my board. I would have drafted him. I would have drafted him very high. So, do you have any thoughts on VanVleet before I take the next pick?
Definitely my favorite Wichita guard from that class, even though some people will say Ron Baker. But no, I think VanVleet has solidified himself as probably the best undrafted player of all time. And I think it's no coincidence that he got there just based on work ethic and continually improving and just being really talented. But elevating that to a level that I don't think anyone ever, well, clearly nobody in the league saw because he went undrafted, but he's become, I think, a legitimate two-way player that I don't think anyone could have expected for the size that he is. And I think it's, he defied a lot of odds, not only being undrafted, but just being that size. And I think when we talk about in the past on the draft, on when we're evaluating prospects, like the level of thresholds you have to meet being such a small guard, I think that Fred sort of defied those thresholds and put an even higher standard for those small guards. So. Yeah, good pick. Probably where I would have gone to.
Yeah, so now we're in a really interesting spot. I have three guys who I don't really want to choose between, that I have to choose between, because they're all good, and they're all players that, you can't say shouldn't be drafted top whatever top 10, I suppose, somewhere in there. I'm at 7 right now, or yeah,
You're selecting 8th.
I'm selecting 8th. Yeah, so I'm gonna take DeJounte Murray. I think there's an argument for two other guys. In fact, this guy was a teammate with one of the other guys for half of a season. DeJounte is kind of a one-season wonder. He had one really good year in San Antonio. Then he got paid, went to Atlanta, and he scored points in Atlanta and played quite a bit. Like I think as much as the last couple of years and 1 year early in his career were colored by injuries, he actually played a lot in Atlanta. He played 74 and 78 games. Last year was basically a complete disaster from start to finish. But this is a guy where, early in his career he was a good defender, but really what he is he's a innings eating guard who can give you league average production as a point guard, in terms of his scoring. And as some, in 31 games, he averaged 7 assists last year. He can pass too. He had his all-star year in San Antonio. He averaged 9 assists. Now, I don't think a lot of that was him making high-level reads. That's not really who he is, but he can be a point guard. He's big. He's not a great defender anymore. He was once considered one. I don't think he was ever actually one, but he has good hands and can wreak some havoc and make plays and get you steals. He's okay. I think he is more likely to help you win than the other two guys, and so that's why I'm going to take him ahead of those two guys. There's one guy that's obviously really falling that a lot of people probably expected to go top 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. But I do think I lean to John, even though he's only a one-time All-Star, and one of the other guys is I believe a multi-time now All-NBA guy. Two-time All-NBA guy that I'm taking DeJounte Murray. That Stone took Alex Caruso and Coop took Fred VanVleet over. I think that shows how much we potentially value that person. But so I'll go DeJounte. Do you guys have any thoughts on DeJounte before Stone's here at the turn?
I think he was real quick, Stone. He was pretty solid and on the ball as a defender when he was younger. And then as he got more offensive responsibility and the reputation kind of solidified, it just kind of fell off. He was really good that one season. He looked as quick as he had ever been. The shot was falling. He could just get into the paint and dice you up. And I just think that he's lost a half a step and the motor's just not as hot. And so those two things combined have kind of led to him not being as good. I still think he's all right. I don't think I would have taken him over one of the other guys that you're talking about, Bryce. I'll talk about when he gets picked, I'll talk about who I think is better and why. But Stone, you're up.
Yeah, I like DeJounte, and I thought that he had some really good seasons. Even his first season in Atlanta, I thought he was actually good. It's just it didn't pair well with who else they had on the roster, and it wasn't the role he was supposed to be in. But I think he's a good player, but that's likely he's gotten worse and likely to continue to get worse after the major injury. So hopefully that isn't the case. But I like DeJounte, but wouldn't have picked him there actually. I'm gonna go with Domantas Sabonis, who people probably thought should have gone way higher than this. At a certain point, it's worth the juice is worth the squeeze, and I'm getting near all-star level production from a player like that. I don't want to speak for all of us. I'll speak for myself, but I assume this is also some of the reasons he fell for you guys is that he's extremely he doesn't drive winning, and also he's extremely difficult for any team to place players around. And this is why I consistently, when we do our player evaluations for the draft, down on bigs like this who cannot space the floor, to a high enough level and cannot defend in space or at the rim. And you can't do any of those, check any of those boxes. It's just really difficult to thrive in the NBA today. To Sabonis' credit, I think he's probably doing it better than anybody else in the league without those certain traits. But it's extremely difficult to build a winning team around a player like that who also has been placed in the role of needing to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. So I think for all those reasons, just the accumulation of them, he has fallen to this point. But at the same time, is this the 10th pick now or around 10? He's still around, a top 10 player, just still, 9. Solely based on the fact that he's that talented, right? Like he's still extremely efficient around the rim as a finisher. Great post-up player. Has really steadily improved throughout his career. He's always been a good passer, but I think he's gotten to the point where he's making a lot of more complex reads than he even did coming into the league. There's a lot of good that Sabonis does. It's just not to the level of when we talk about players that have the ball in their hands as often as Sabonis does. Generally speaking, it's because you think they are like the number one player on your team that can drive home a championship. And I just don't think that's who Sabonis is. And it makes it really difficult to build a team like that.
Yeah, so I do want to say, like, Stone, I agree with you. I'm just going to play a little bit of devil's advocate. I think there's at least a little bit of chicken and the egg question with Sabonis, right? Like, if he was in if he had been on better teams across his career, like, could he have been more of a driver of winning? I actually think the best version of Sabonis was sixth man Sabonis. Now, he never actually won sixth man of the year, which is fairly crazy to me. But he made 2 All-Star games in Indiana. Has had 2 years where he made All NBA teams. Was an All-Star one of those years, and came 7th and 8th in MVP voting in those 2 years in Sacramento. And then last year had what I would say is a more accurate season. I think he's a really bad defensive player. In a way, like someone like Jokic, like isn't, right? Even someone like Şengün isn't. He is such a difficult fit because he can't move his feet. He doesn't play super physically strong in terms of like guarding post ups or anything like that, and he is not athletic enough to be a drop. I also just don't think he's quite the level of passer that I think sometimes people think he is. And I do think that limits him as a post guy. He's pretty reliant on having smaller guys on him. He's flawed. I think he could be a great sixth man. I think he's the ultimate example of, man, if you had the luxury to have this talented 6'10" guy as your sixth man, like, you're really cooking with gas. Like, he's like the perfect version of what prime Montrezl Harrell was. Like, that is great. But that's, I do have these, like, I just don't know what a great team around him would look like. You'd have to have a really good rim protecting four. You thought you maybe had it with Miles Turner and him, right? Where it's like Miles Turner could space the floor and drop. And I don't know. I like Sabonis, but I think your ceiling is pretty capped if Sabonis is on your team, and especially if he's like a top 3 player on your team. I think we even, the best version of that Kings team was really good, but I don't think anyone had any illusions that was a team that could really compete for a championship. So I think this is where you should take him. This is where I would have taken him, but I do think he is very flawed. Stowe, do you want to go ahead with your next pick?
Yeah, my next pick, this might be controversial. I'm going to go with Jakob Poeltl here. Take the big. I think Jakob Poeltl has, throughout his pretty much entire career, steadily been a top 15, a top half starting center throughout his career. He's a really solid defensive player, strong rim protector, put on a lot of muscle throughout his career, and has become someone that can defend post-ups much better than he used to. He's a good passer, underrated passer. efficient around the rim, just with little simple. He keeps it simple, right? Like the simplicity of Pirtle as a finisher is what drives him as a scorer. And he's not someone that you're relying on to be a top 3, maybe even 4 option on a championship team, but is capable of providing it and providing a level of rim running that isn't elite or anything, but can still be there as an option for him offensively. So, the obvious guy. I mean, we don't have to dance around the name anymore. Is probably Brandon Ingram that people are going to be wanting to pick.
And that is who I'll take next for what it's worth.
Yeah, which is also just interesting that what is that? 4 current or former Raptors players have been picked now in the lottery, but. Yeah, to me, Pirtle just is more of a winning player than Ingram is, even though Ingram is more talented and to me more fun to watch. But I mean, if you didn't notice it with the Caruso pick, my main goal in any situation is to win basketball games, and I think Pirtle in his role does a better job of that than Ingram in his role.
For what it's worth, I would have taken Ingram above Pirtle. If for nothing else, then I think Ingram is going to be higher on a small forwards ranking than Pirtle would be on a bigs ranking. And I think that Pirtle is also more replaceable. The question with Ingram is if he was actually on more competent teams, could he be a good, second best player? I'm not sure. I'm really not. I mean, he's on a max contract this year, so the Raptors better fucking hope so. There's been some injury issues with both of them too. Neither of them play a ton of games a year. I slightly prefer Ingram because he's an okay catch and shoot shooter from 3. He doesn't take as many as you want. But like last year, he shot 37% on 6 3-point attempts, which is nice. Like, could he be more of a solid secondary scorer in the Chris Middleton realm? I don't think so. And he'd be a really bad defensive player for that type of archetype. But there's a world that if he was on the Bucks, I'd be like, okay, he actually really helps the Bucks because of who they are and where they're at. There's a world that if he's on the Timberwolves next year, I'm like, it's kind of weird, but I think he probably does help them a little bit. I don't love it. I'm not high on Ingram, but I do think I prefer him over Pirtle. I would rather have Sabonis over him, I think, because at least Sabonis gives you some floor. Part of the problem with Ingram is he's not even so good, and especially because he can't stay healthy, that he gives you a floor. So you're probably going to pay him a lot of money, and you still might just be bad. There's a real chance that the Raptors are just bad next year, even with RJ Barrett and Brandon Ingram and Emmanuel Quickly and Scotty Barnes all making a ton of money and Pirtle making a good amount of money. That's a weird team, dude. That's a weird team. Colin Murray-Boyle's rotting on the bench. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely controversial, right? We almost probably seem too anti-buckets. Scoring is important and you need to score, and it's important that we understand that these guys are potentially in contexts that don't help them out a ton. Ingram was part of the Anthony Davis trade, so he never got to be on a competent Lakers team. How different would his career look if they traded Kuzma instead of Ingram, right? And we're talking about Ingram being there as AD and Braun and Alex Caruso and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope are helping them bring a championship. I don't know. Ingram can pass a little bit. So there's some stuff there. Maybe we're too low on him. Again, I would have taken over Pirtle, but I don't think he's some crazy high level player, and that's why you look at it and you're like, man, he had an okay career. He's what did we just draft him, Coop? 11th,
yeah,
11th, and so. And I don't think that's absurd. Now, for what it's worth, this class does have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys that have made all-star teams. The other guys, 8, excuse me, because Fred VanVleet has made an all-star team. So 8 guys that have made all-star teams. That's a lot for a draft. But there's also it's not like any of these guys have been consistent. This draft has multiple one-time all-stars. A lot of guys that have been kind of up and down, and those guys that we drafted ahead of them that didn't make all-star games, they have something that Brandon Ingram doesn't. And so I do think There's some intrigue there. But yeah, no, this is where I'll take him. I'm fine with it, I guess. Now this is where we enter the Wild West. My board is completely Jakob Pertl. It would have been like I had him at 11. He was the last guy. I wouldn't even say he was in the same tier as Ingram. Like I definitely would have taken Ingram over him no matter what. But I do think we're kind of in the Wild West now, Coop. So at 12 and 13, I suppose. Who are you taking? You probably just take both, and then we can talk about them.
Yeah. I will say that Ingram was the guy who I would have taken him over DeJounte and Sabonis and Pirtle, I think. To me, I think as much as Ingram is like just a loser on NBA teams, I think that there's upside for the scoring if you just got him to move some of the scoring back to the three-point line from the mid-range and allowed his playmaking to really thrive. I think he's really grown as a playmaker the last few years. There's a world where he could be that kind of Chris Middleton level guy, for a decent team. He's played for the two of the five most dysfunctional franchises of, at the time when he was there. So I feel like he's kind of, and part of that, the reason why they're dysfunctional is because A, he can't stay healthy, and B, even when he is healthy, they stink. But I think that there are worlds where he is actually able to contribute to winning with good coaching and stuff. But I will happily sit here and take Dorian Finney-Smith at 12 and then kind of go off the rails a bit and go with my favorite player maybe from this class and go with Karis LeVert, another guy who I think is best optimized as a bench scorer, but I think the last few years has really grown to be able to contribute to more winning basketball than he was, back when he made the All-Star game or he should have made the All-Star team and then got hurt. And then D'Angelo Russell took his spot that year. Right. Like, I don't think he's like this star level scorer, Karis, but he's pretty good. And then Dorian Finney-Smith, just the ultimate 3-and-D player, can guard like 3s through 5s, can really shoot the ball, just plays he plays the right way. I'm pretty happy with both of my gets here. And I would honestly rather have both of them on a winning team than Ingram and Sabonis and maybe Pirtle, but I don't know if I go that far.
I'd probably rather have Finney-Smith over Pirtle, honestly. But I think these are great picks. These are two guys that I had in this range. And again, I think it's interesting that this draft has a lot of guys outside of the top that are still, getting paid and are really like potential contributors to high level teams. Even as we get into guys who, are a little bit lower down, into the late teens, early 20s. There's a lot of guys that are still interesting, like still contributing, where the last draft, there's a lot of guys who are still technically in the league, but like not really doing much. But the fall off in this draft is going to be much, much more stark. But yeah, I think Karis LeVert, Dorian Finney-Smith, both really good players. Karis LeVert has had probably a pretty underrated career in terms of just like, he's just kind of always doing the same thing. He's gotten up like a couple years in Brooklyn. He was scoring like 18 to 20 points. His first year in Indiana, or his only year in Indiana, he scored a lot of points. Then for Cleveland, he was like a bench scorer, and that's probably what he's going to be for Atlanta. But he can defend now. Like, he's really grown into his own a little bit as a defender. The shot making is really the thing that's kind of fluctuated, right? Like, he's just never been a particularly consistent outside shooter, and that wax and wane hurts him. But I mean, I think Karis LeVert is a consummate sixth man, where it's like he might not win sixth man of the year, because generally the guys that win sixth mans of the years are on kind of mediocre teams where they really need sixth man production. But Karis LeVert just kind of does it. I think that's very reasonable. For me, up next, the guy I probably would have taken over LeVert, though, not over Smith, but over LeVert. I'll take Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield, really weird player. Will have a better probably legacy than those two guys that you drafted ahead of him, because he probably is a top 8 shooter of all time, 7 shooter of all time, something like that. I mean, there were a number of years where he was really shooting the cover off the ball and really getting him up. He's had multiple years averaging, a lot of points, had a very legendary college career as well. There's problems with trying to have Buddy Hield on your team, partially in that for the longest time he really wanted to start, and was so bad defensively that it was kind of hard. He's not really a playmaker, but man, he can just really shoot the cover off the ball, and he is the type of shooter that can kind of change the geometry of the floor a little bit because he is such a good shooter and he takes so many. I mean, at his best, like that 1 year in Sacramento, or a couple years in Sacramento, he's at 9.6 and 10.2 3-point attempts per game. Like, he was really getting them up. And so geometry changing shooter who can actually make them at that level. This is about the range for, right? We're late lottery now. And was this the last, I was 14, right? The last pick of the lottery. So yeah, I think that's where I'm at with that. Stone, take us out of the lottery. Who are your next two guys here?
Yeah. I agree with all three picks in that order too. So good job, fellas. I think all those players are solid NBA players. I am gonna go with Derrick Jones Jr. here for my next pick. I want. I think he's just, for me, the best remaining available. And then I'll go with Malcolm Brogdon, who has had an up and down career, I would say. A lot of injuries, huge variance in roles. I remember at one point in Indiana, he was all-star level, playing out of his mind. And then he's had 6 Man of the Year, Rookie of the Year, just a really odd career throughout the entirety of it. But, during a lot of points of it, he was really good. So I'm going to go with those two guys here.
Yeah, I wish Brogdon was healthier. I think I would have taken him probably over LeVert if he was like consistently healthy and really good. I think he just is kind of that ideal just starter guard kind of look where he's not going to be like an all-star. He's not going to like provide a ton of like crazy value, but he'll show up and he'll, play the right way or whatever and not mess up. He can play off ball some, he can play on the ball. I really like what he provides. The 4 picks, Dorian Finney-Smith through to Derrick Jones Jr. were all chalk for me. You guys picked the exact, level of guy that the exact order I had them in. So it's fun to see that this is such like a shit show and we're all kind of just agreeing on the order for the most part.
Yeah, there is one guy I had still above Malcolm Brogdon. Now, I will admit that Brogdon had much higher highs. I mean, he won a 6 Man of the Year in Boston, which I kind of forgot about. And he's still like scoring points. Like he scored points in the few games he played for Washington. But yeah, he's really struggled to stay healthy. Yeah, Derrick Jones Jr. is great. I would have taken him above Brogdon probably. So Brogdon's tough for me because again, he was good like that last year in Milwaukee. So yeah, you're probably right to have taken him above, despite I'm probably a little bit too recency biased with my being a little bit lower on him. He struggles to just play, man. He just really struggles to play. He's had two really healthy seasons, and in those seasons he won a Rookie of the Year and a 6th Man of the Year. And then the other one where he was fairly healthy, he got himself a bag to go to Indiana. I wish he was a little better defensively or a little better shooter because I feel like he's not quite a backup point guard, but also not quite a good enough shooter or defender to be like a true starting 2. So I do think that's an issue. But I'll take Chris Dunn here. And 3 years ago, Chris Dunn would have been in like the bust category, right? Or at the very least, like the played 5 years in the league, but barely, and is out of it now. But man, he's really found something in Utah, and then for the Clippers. Just one of the best defensive guards in the NBA. It took him a long time to figure things out, but I mean, he started 58 games for a good Clippers team last year. I just really like Chris Dunn, and I feel like there's a guy with a couple more years left to give. So maybe this is too high because like the legacy is not good, and obviously he had to go through a lot of pain to get there. But with some of the guys we're going to be talking about here in the next couple picks, I still think Chris Dunn is the guy over them because I think he has maybe a couple more good years left. And the other guys, I just don't believe in that for them. For what it's worth, this will be his age 31 season. So it's not like he's like super young and still a bust for where he was picked. But I just love his defense. He can kind of play some point guard in terms of his passing, though not really. He's a pretty bad offensive player. Like, I'm not going to deny that, but just a really, really fun, good defensive player. And really happy that he's kind of come through on things. And he's the last guy on our list of guys who I think like legitimately helps teams win. I just don't know that anyone else really does. There's a couple guys who maybe did for like 1 year, but I don't know there's a lot of guys who actually help teams win. So interested to see what you guys do with these next couple picks.
Wow. How dare you talk about the GOAT, Malik Beasley, as though he's not a winning basketball player. He's not, but he does shoot the ball pretty well.
Quick sidebar question. Is like he done? Like, is he not going to play in the league anymore?
They dropped the charges.
Cleared him. They cleared him,
but I don't think anybody wants to touch him because it's
he hasn't signed yet.
Well, because the problem is that he's like an idiot, even if
it's not like guilty. This is like the first sign of trouble with Malik Beasley, right? It's like even if he's not guilty, it's like like. Also, I know like part of what came out is that like his landlord was suing him for like not paying rent for like a year or something.
And his dentist was suing him for not paying him for work. So there's all sorts of lawsuits going on with him.
And he was gonna get it back because that last year in Detroit he was really good. I think he's kind of been somewhat overrated because he's a really bad defensive player who is also just like a really never been a particularly efficient 2-point scorer, but like, man, he can he can really shoot. Man, I didn't know that 1 year in Minnesota he averaged almost 20 points per game. Really weird player. Sorry, Coop, I didn't mean to interrupt. You want to give your little spiel on Beasley?
He's weird. He shoots the ball. I like him in kind of that Terry Rozier mold, but I do think he's like bigger, and so the bad defense isn't as bad. And I think he's just better. I think he takes better shots, and he's a better off-ball player. The second player here, there's somebody who I have higher on my board, but I want to take David Nwaba here because if healthy, I think he's the best player left of everybody. A 6'4" power forward. I think a lot of the problems with the guys below him is like the guy who I have above him. I'll just say it is Gary Payton the second. And my big problem with Gary Payton is he like can't even make layups. Like there's not an offensive thing that Gary Payton does on the floor. Nwaba's legitimately a good screener, roller, has more of an outside shot, and is a good inside finisher. And I do think that it just kind of sucks that he's kind of his body's just fallen apart on him because if healthy, that's a guy who would be playing playoff rotation minutes for a lot of teams this season. When he was on the Rockets, he was like a starting level player. Like that's not a something to. I'm not pushing any agendas here. It's just a fact.
Yeah, I like Nwaba. I would have taken Payton over him, and I will take Gary Payton a second here. I think him and Chris Dunn were fairly close for me with Malik Beasley in that mix. Part of the reason I chose Chris Dunn is I just think Dunn is a meaningfully better defender than Payton. And I also think that Payton has been somewhat lucky to kind of find the perfect team that allows him to play as like a cutting 6'2" guy. Like, and listen, all the credit to him, right? Like, he's worked really hard. He's really become like a competent enough shooter on super low volume, but still like the fact that he can step in and make one a game here and there, like, okay, like that's sometimes all it takes. Like I love Gary Payton and I'm happy he's been successful. I don't think you're wrong necessarily for saying I would like Nwaba would have contributed more if he could have stayed healthy. Peyton is a really fun player, great dunks, good defender. I think not like a great defender. He's kind of like a funnel and force a certain way guy than like a erase someone from the game guy, which is what Chris Dunn can be at his best. And I think they're fairly similar offensive players. Dunn is probably a little bit more of a point guard. Peyton is a better cutter and a better make my one shot I get a game, coin flip type guy. So I'll take Peyton, but I again, we're kind of past the point where I'm like getting up in arms about anybody. Stone, you're up here, and we are getting dangerously close to being out of guys that are still playing in the league.
Close, but not quite. One who just recently came back in, I will go with Gershon Yabusele here, who I actually didn't expect to make it this far, who I think I would have taken over the last 4 picks. It's starting to get to the point where you're splitting hairs a little bit, but I actually like the reinvented Yabusele that we've seen over this past season with the Sixers. I think that he's been really interesting as a player that can space the floor, but obviously he's always had that big, strong frame and uses it. And I think defensively he makes better reads than he used to, and he's someone that I think is a solid like 8th man in the NBA. And I think that getting that at this point, I'm happy with the value there. So I'll go with him here. And I have another pick as well, I believe. Of course I do, because I'm not ready. But I will be taking, unless you guys want to talk about Yabusele for a quick minute here.
He was not good early in his career, like distinctly bad, and that's why he kind of fell out. And he went overseas, kind of found a good role to kind of figure himself out. And it's cool that he like made his way back into the league. But I don't think that the Sixers are going to be missing him so much. And there's a reason they let him walk just for like, just in case we want to give Quentin Grimes a little bit more money. Like he's not, I would say 8th man is even a bit of a stretch. But if you're a bad team, having Yabu as your 8th man isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, I don't love Yabusele. There's one guy I would have taken ahead of him comfortably, maybe even 2 guys. I just think even still he's just not a very good defensive player, but he's fine. I mean, he's fine. He fell out of the league after 2 years, so he hasn't even like. There's a chance that if he doesn't stick in the league, he would fall back down into the bust category rather than the 5+ years in the league category, which I think is kind of interesting. I'm guessing he gets 2 more years and gets to be 5 years in the league, but I do think that it's been an interesting career path for Yabusele. I'm rooting for him. I think there's a good chance he doesn't play like at all really for the Knicks this year in terms of actually being in the rotation versus there's one guy that I think will still be in a rotation next year. So, or maybe even 2 guys. We'll see if Stone takes one of them.
I don't think so because this guy liked when he was in a rotation for a while. He is no longer, but I'm going to go with Daniel House here. I think that he, during his stretch of his career, provided decent rotation wing depth for a team that could use it. I think defensively, he was not like a stopper by any means, but someone who felt confident on that end of the court to not be just completely abused, at least for a couple seasons. And as a shooter, extremely up and down. But during that variance, he had, I think, some productive seasons that to me was he looked like a top 8 rotation player for a year or 2. Didn't last very long, but I enjoyed the cup of coffee that he had in the NBA.
Stone, I'm not going to lie. Who did you just pick?
Daniel House, former Cat.
Oh, okay. I should have known that. Dude, all you had to do was say, "For the house, for the team," though. That was his rap song that he wrote while he was on the Rockets.
I did not know that.
It's awful. He's a bad rapper, and he was an awful basketball player. Despite other than like the 18-19 season where he was on a 2-way and then got to come up to the team and was awesome. every single year after that, there was like he was like.
I'll be honest. I'll be honest. Taking Daniel House above Georges Niang, who I will take next, and one other guy who
He's fat and
again,
old. I don't like.
will still play. Like there's another guy that will be in a rotation who might even start next year. We're obviously very low on this guy, but there is another player who will maybe even start on an NBA team that wants to like win next year.
I'm not think. I'm completely unaware of who you're referring to, but
we'll see if
yeah, maybe I'll regret this.
House is just not good and was never good. He could just hit open threes and was athletic, and the Rockets desperately needed someone who was 6'5" and athletic. And any team that just needs one guy to do that, House is fine. But I would not have taken him. I would have taken him over Niang because Niang is like a loser, and I think he's just like a dickhead, and he's not good enough to be kind of a dickhead.
So my slight pushback is listen, Yang last year for the little bit of time he was in Atlanta averaged 12 points in Atlanta. Like he's going to be like a part of their rotation this year. He's made shots. He has not in his career since he started being allowed to shoot the ball in games. He has not shot below 37% from three, and all but the 1 year he's been above 40%. Like he can actually just really shoot as a four. Doesn't get him up at a crazy volume or anything, but he and the other guy that I'm hinting at, who I want to see if Coop will take, they have that in common. Where are they particularly good defensively? No, but neither was Daniel House. They can at least actually shoot. Daniel House can only kind of shoot, and they're both bigger than Daniel House. Like. They're just better players. Like there's a reason they are still in the league.
I would not. I have to take him. I have to take him because there's literally nobody else. I'll take Taurean Prince here.
It has to be.
But he's ass. He's actually ass.
I don't like Taurean Prince either, but I do think you guys are maybe through the process of this exercise losing sight of the fact that these players are still like in the NBA. Like there's still some value there. Daniel House has no NBA value because he's not in the fucking league, and he's also not good enough to be in the league. It's not like he's not in the league for lack of opportunity. He's gotten multiple opportunities and he was ass at every single one. Taurean Prince, for his issues, is like an okay offensive player. Daniel House has never been an okay offensive or defensive player. You guys could say again. I don't like Taurean Prince either. I took so many players ahead of him for a reason. But at a certain point, Taurean Prince can average points and shoot. He shot 44% from three across 80 games last year. Like he's not like some crazy movement shooter or anything, but if his ass is standing in the corner, he will make the shot. He's 6'8" and athletic enough that he can kind of contribute as a rebounder. As bad as he is defensively, he doesn't get like attacked every game, only in the playoffs. Yes, he is not a particularly additive player. He's like a 73 overall. I don't play 2K anymore, but like he's like that. Like he is a bargain bin, like replacement level wing, but he hasn't been replaced. Daniel House got replaced, and
Daniel House didn't have Darvin Ham though.
It doesn't. Like I mean, it's
House can't play for like far better coaches. I will say
if Taurean Prince was a free agent right now, 20 teams would sign him for a minimum. Daniel House is a free agent right now. 0 teams will sign him for a minimum. Like that does like there is a material thing that matters there. I don't like Taurean Prince. I don't think he's particularly good, but he can play in a rotation. He can start games in the NBA. He started 73 games for the fucking 3 seed in the East last year. Like that does matter. Like we can try to separate from context all we want. At a certain point, there is something there that keeps him in the league, and it's not just that the league is bad decision makers. Like, I inherently like I agree with you guys, and also like it doesn't matter. Like I know, like taking Daniel House above Taurean Prince at 20, like who gives a fuck? Like I'm not trying to like crash out on you necessarily, but I'm trying to give my perspective in that it does like these players are materially better than the meme players that are going to be left on the board who are now out of the league. And it's not just because they're in the league, but it's because they are in the league and they're doing something. Most guys who are in the league at this point, and they've been in the league for 8 years, like it's because they are kind of like, they actually do something. Like you're usually not getting chances when you're 31 just to get a chance. It's because a team actually believes that you can help them in one way or another. And I don't know exactly what it is with Taurean Prince other than making open shots. It's partially because he doesn't get attacked, but he might be a great locker room guy. It might just be that he knows how to actually do stuff. And sometimes, like someone like Daniel House just did it. Like Daniel House sometimes would just not know the action he's supposed to be running and fuck it up. Like Taurean Prince, for whatever it's worth, seems like he's in the right place all the time. And that does, like, that makes a difference when you're 6'8" and you make shots. So off my soapbox. It doesn't really make a material difference, but I do think you guys are overly negative on these guys that are in the NBA that we don't like, and not negative enough on the guys that are out of the NBA for a reason. But anyways, you still have another pick, don't you?
Yeah, but I'm not sure I've ever disagreed more with the Bryce, especially, and it's over Taurean Prince, which is really funny. But I watched a full season of Taurean Prince when he was with the Lakers. I could confidently say that he can pretty much do nothing beyond shoot open shots, and I strongly disagree that he does not get attacked often, because he's that level of bad defender that did get attacked a lot from my recollection at the point of attack. So I'm very out on Taurean Prince. And I think I would estimate, like, I mean, this is a rough estimation, but 25% of the league is not the top 500 or whatever players that are in the world. Like, I think probably 25% of them could be replaced by other guys in the entire world that play in other leagues. And to me, Taurean Prince is one of them. So it's a completely different perspective, and I appreciate you bringing it up. But I guess we're gonna have to just see things differently with Taurean Prince of all people. But we probably don't need to spend 40 minutes talking about him.
Yeah, I'm like sick to my stomach looking at the rest of the guys left. But Furkan Korkmaz at least stuck around for like 7 years in the league. Stuck around long enough to demand a
Stuck
trade.
around longer than he wanted to.
Yeah. He was he was a fine shooter, career 35% shooter, tall. That's about it.
That's the point of the draft we've gotten to.
Yeah, I feel like I have to pick him because everybody else that I like
these can go quick. These can go quick.
Rapid fire.
I liked everyone else back when I was 15 and I didn't know what was good basketball. So I had to actually take a step back and look at who has actually had a decent career at this point.
Yeah, and Furkan, for what it's worth, one of two guys that I think could probably still come over to the NBA if he wanted to, but doesn't want to. Like Furkan, I think there might have been an argument for him over Taurean Prince, unlike Daniel House. And I think there's also an argument for, I'm going to take Juancho Hernan Gomez, who I still think is like a perfectly fine, he could be like an okay 11th guy in the NBA, right? Like 10th guy, where it's like he can kind of do things. Like he's always been like an okay kind of shot blocker for his for like an off-ball four, but he's never actually been particularly good at anything. He doesn't really create any havoc defensively. Actually, I guess the block numbers have never been good. I just in my memory, he's been a fine shot blocker. His biggest issue is he's never quite been the level of shooter he needed to be. He had 1 year where he shot really well in Utah, and then otherwise it's been pretty rough from a shooting standpoint. But he's fine. He's okay. I wish he was better because he's a guy I really want to like. But another guy who probably could, like, if he was willing to just bounce around and be a back end of the bench guy, he probably could stay in the league. Same with like a Furkan. But those guys would oftentimes rather go overseas and play over there and have fun. So, Stone, you're up here with the turn.
Yeah, I should have taken this guy over Daniel House. I made a mistake. He was drafted, never even played in the NBA, but it is my current nickname if you're watching on YouTube, Isaiah Cordinier, who I actually, of anybody.
Did he come over? I believe he did come over
for Summer League.
That's it.
I don't believe he ever played an NBA game, but
I'm pretty sure I thought he played like
you know what? He might have played 5 games for the Nets.
Wikipedia says he didn't play a game.
Actually, as I look at it, it's saying he didn't. I thought for sure he signed to play, but you're probably right. Anyways, I apologize.
No, you're good. He was drafted, I think, 44th overall by the Hawks, and he stayed in France this whole time. This is someone I like. This isn't like just a BS pick. Like, I strongly believe that he's an NBA player overseas. Like, I think that this is someone that could be in a 7-man rotation for a lot of teams. He's just found a lot of success overseas, had great national showings, loves France, has always played in France. He's French. So I understand it. But this is someone that, I mean, to be honest, like, we've made some BS picks. Like, if we're actually drafting about current guys in the NBA that we would take, like, I would have him maybe 16th in this draft. Like, I think he is an actually good player, and someone that I actually I don't know if I ever posted it or not, but I heavily watched a lot of his games last summer for a series I was doing on NBA players that or guys that should be in the NBA that currently aren't. And I think that he's someone that is top 10 on my list of guys that are not in the NBA that should be. So that's my little spiel in the longest. I'll talk about anyone remaining, but I'm fully sold on Isaiah Cordinho.
This is your last pick, Stone.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I think that's
you have one more.
Okay.
No. I thought didn't he pick 2 guys?
No, he picked Cordinho. That's it.
Yeah, I just talked about Cordinho for 10 minutes. But my second pick, boy, the list is real thin here, fellas. Boy, I'm gonna do it. We're gonna go with NBA champion Patrick McCaw, who I think had a couple. There's a couple years where a lot of people, myself included, thought that this guy was a rotation player. He fooled us. He wasn't, but he was a lot of fun to watch. He was super athletic, and I think that there were times where you thought that this guy was a future maybe 6-man of the year candidate somewhere down the line in his career. Just didn't pan out that way, but I enjoyed watching him, and I think he had a lot of fun years in the NBA.
Yeah, Patty McCaw, not on my list, but I think we're at an area where it's reasonable. This is my last pick. I'll take Jake Layman.
I almost took him. I almost did, but that was too many white players where people were going to start questioning me throughout this draft.
Yo, Jake, how many minutes you getting tonight?
No, I mean, Jake Layman, one of those guys, he just never shot it well enough. Was a, fine 6'8" athlete who could kind of defend, was strong, was a good rebounder, I believe. I have to check his rebound rates, which I don't really feel like going down to doing, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, we're choosing between guys who made zero real impact at the NBA. I mean, it was him or another NBA meme player. We'll see if Coop takes him. But there's one gigantic meme that went the lottery in this draft who technically missed making my bust categorization because he got a second contract. But yeah, it's very narrow.
I won't be taking him. I want to give some shout outs to who is considered for this pick because it's not anybody from the lottery. Chinanu Onuaku for his brief but beautiful Rockets tenure. Shaq Harrison because I thought he was really good on 2K. Gabe York for being awesome. Abdel Nader for pissing me off every single time the Rockets played the Thunder. And actually, no, Scal didn't go lottery, but Scal Labissiere for trying to fight back into the league for his heart. But I'm going to have to go with Timothy Luwawu Cabarrot here at 30, a guy who is one of the OG skinny players that I have loved forever. Could not shoot the ball, but man, when he was on and he could get downhill, he was fun. Probably never deserved to play in the league, but he had some moments. I want to actually pull up his stats real quick.
Prospect Timothy Luwawu Cabarrot deserved an NBA opportunity. It quickly became something that was not deserved, but as a prospect, definitely someone that was a first rounder to me.
Yeah, so he never averaged over 8 points, but I could have sworn he averaged like 12, and he was good in the bubble. But I like Cabarrot. I've always liked Cabarrot. I'm fine with him here at 30. So you guys,
Yeah,
any thoughts?
I probably would have taken Valentine, but whatever. Yeah, I mean, this is a very heavy bust draft. So there were 11 guys that. So the way I'm categorizing busts is, excuse me, my nose is super plugged up. But the way I'm categorizing busts is first rounders that didn't complete their rookie contract or didn't play 5 or more years in the league. So that list: Dragan Bender that went at 4. Marquise Chris that went at 8, Thon McCurr that went at 10, Georgios Papagiannis, who I also think it probably has an argument for like probably borderline, like could have played in the league, but just is better overseas at this point. But he went at 13. Wade Baldwin went at 17. Henry Ellenson went at 19. DeAndre Bembry at 20, I believe, or maybe 21. Malachi Richardson at 22. Ante Zizic, Timothy Luau-Cabarrot, and Bryce Johnson. And then, sadly, I have to put this guy in here, Scal Labissiere, who went at 28. So lots of busts, right, you would say, in this draft. But this draft was overall a better draft in terms of like, if you just look at the top 10, I mean, last draft we had DeLon Wright going at 6, and this draft we have Brandon Ingram going at 11. But are there any takeaways from you guys in this draft in terms of anything you learned, anything you value specifically from this exercise as compared to doing the 2015 one?
I think it's just overall better talent. I would say through the lottery all the way from start to finish. I think it's just more talent than across the board than we saw last time we recorded. There's an interesting, I guess, dichotomy of production versus value throughout this class that I think we had good conversation about, and I think is interesting that is maybe not so stark in other classes. But overall, like I would say, this is a fairly middle of the road class, in my opinion. I think in general, this is not a class that produced all-time greats or anything, but has a lot of good players throughout their careers that I think not a whole lot of classes have that level of, maybe, I mean, it took until 10 till we got to Sabonis, and I don't think a lot of classes have that level of player available at 10. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting class, but I would say overall middle of the road.
I think this class is beautiful because it was destroyed by Kristaps Porzingis going at 4. I mean, Dragan Bender, awful. Was never good. Was never even a prospect. Goes at 4. Marquise Chris, dog shit. Goes at 8. Thon McCurr goes at 10. Georgios Papagiannis, 13. And for a few years after Sabonis was drafted, it looked like even he was a bust because people tried to turn him into Kristaps Porzingis as a spacer for Russell Westbrook. And that's 4 guys, 5 potentially, who were drafted. I mean, and that's not even talking about the other bigs who were drafted and put in bad positions later in the draft. And all the patterns created by Kristaps Porzingis and just this fetishization of tall guys who can shoot, and that being the lesson that was taken from Kristaps, is one of the stupidest things in NBA history. Multiple people lost their jobs because Kristaps was good and taken too high, and they also learned the wrong lesson from Kristaps being good. Kristaps was good as a young guy because he could dribble and he could get downhill and he had a ton of funk, and he could also shoot. And the shooting allowed him to dribble. But just your 4 or 5 man being able to space at that size was always just like a false flag operation. And also, it turns out Kristaps wasn't even the best big man shooter from his own class. You know, Cat was right there and ended up becoming the greatest big man shooter of all time, and is a completely different player than all the people who tried to create Kristaps in the draft. I think that there's this huge, long history in the NBA of trying to chase somebody else's coattails is never going to succeed. Trying to seeing what succeeds in the league and trying to follow that and follow these trends is never going to work. To me, that's why the Rockets never won a championship, because instead of building around what made James Harden special and building around what made Chris Paul special, they looked at what the Warriors had and specifically built their team to beat them. What do we need in a vacuum to beat them? Not how do we maximize the special that we have on our team, right? The only real way to true success, and what the smart teams do, is they figure out the special, they find the special, and then they build around that. And it's just, I think 2016 is such a beautiful microcosm of bad teams making stupid decisions and smart teams making great ones. The Raptors had arguably the single greatest draft of all time in this class. They won a championship because of this class. Without Fred and Pascal Siakam and the scouting that went into those two, they do not win a championship. It's that simple. Like, this is one of the, it's beautiful. And multiple teams completely destroyed their entire futures for years with how bad their drafting was here. It's just, it's so interesting what the draft can represent.
So really quickly, I remember watching this draft live from start to finish, and it became who can out crazy who at a certain point. Like, it just was like, let's just make the most. And it really, I think, climaxed with the Papagiannis pick of what are we doing here? And I think everyone in the NBA collectively just lost their minds on who they were trying to pick and trying to find the biggest hidden gem and one up everybody else. And I think that a lot of lessons were learned from this class, that you don't need to do that, and that real tangible skill is necessary to be picked ahead of the draft rather than hypotheticals.
This does seem like a draft that was very much this guy could be this, right? Like, and having guys that were actually, I mean, Pascal at 27 and then DeJounte at 29 is like an ultimate, like, those are two guys that were just good at basketball, but the projection was kind of weird. And so they fell a ton. And, you know, Marquise Chris and Joggin Bender, man, the projection is super exciting, but they're like just not actually good enough at the sport of basketball. Like, you know, those were guys where it's like there was zero chance they figure something out. There's other busts where I do feel like there's chances for them to figure it out, right? Like, again, Georgios Papagiannis, maybe not even the worst pick ever. Like, okay, I could see it. Henry Ellenson, okay. Even like Denzel Valentine at 14 is like a perfectly reasonable pick to me. It's like, okay, like that's probably around where I would have had it. He was ancient, but like he shot the shit out of it at Michigan State. He was super smart. He was one of the best players in the country. Like, generally, those guys should only fall so far. Okay, I think those are all, like, those are reasonable, but there's certain guys where it's like, you know, a Fred VanVleet going undrafted after being like one of the best players on. I believe that Wichita State team won the championship, right? That was a championship team. Like, come on. Like, I know he's small, but there's got to be, like, and I think that's something we've realized a little bit, right? Is just like tangible effects on basketball still matter. Like, the NBA, I think for a while was such a projection league, and it's starting to come away from that a little bit with a little bit more focus on what can these guys actually do. So I found this to be really interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed listening. This was really fun to record, as always, fellas. Yeah, for Coop, Ali_Oop_Coop, for Stone Out Report _Court. I'm at Bryce114. Make sure you guys give us a like, rating, review, all that fun stuff. Like, subscribe, comment. If you're on YouTube, tell us how stupid we are for, you know, doing certain things wrong and how we should have taken Fred VanVleet ahead of Brandon Ingram or whatever. I really do want to hear you guys' thoughts on this, because the last one felt a little bit more like okay, like we know who the top 2 guys are, then we know who 3 through 5 are, and then it's just kind of like whatever. This one, I think there's a lot more subjectivity in terms of how do you like your stars? How do you weight what they've done with the context they've been in versus who they are, right? Like how much is them exerting themselves on their context and how much is the context putting weight on them? I think all those are really interesting questions. I even think there's an argument like a Brandon Ingram versus Jamal Murray argument that we didn't really have that I think is interesting where, what if the Nuggets had drafted Brandon Ingram instead and he got to, come up in that environment? I think there's all these interesting ideas that this draft brings up because a lot of these guys were successful or not successful in kind of similar ways, which I do think is kind of rare. There's a bucket getter draft. There's a lot of guys who scored, and that was their path to contribution. There was a lot of like 3-and-D guys, and so I don't know. I this was really, really fun. This was a great time. So let us know what you guys thought. This has been the Upside Swings NBA Draft podcast. We hope we hit our ceiling. Thank you. I apologize for my dog.
It was me yesterday, you today, so it'll be Cooper's turn next.
I'm just trying to wait for her to finish. I'm guessing that the garbage people are here. Okay.
Derek Jones Jr. is really good, at least.
Yeah.